Welcome to Teams Tuesday, a podcast about mastering the best about what other people have already figured out. Teams Tuesday focuses on insights and lessons that never expire. You will walk away from every episode with actionable insights that help you get better results and be more productive.
This was about as bizarre and easy as it gets.
The client just couldn't make up their mind.
I feel like we had top.
Went from a project of 20 weeks to just 2.
The DevOps was a cultural shift.
This is Teams Tuesday with your host, Peter Ward.
Welcome to Teams Tuesday. It's September the 21st. Fall is now coming in, and my name is Peter Ward. I'm the host of Teams Tuesday. I'm here in New York. Got a phenomenal guest, David Patrick. So, David, welcome to Teams Tuesday. How are you?
I'm doing great, Peter. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure indeed. And you're based down in Baltimore. You'll still get the full weather there, do you?
Oh, yeah. Great weather today. Not hot, beautiful, no rain, so you can't complain.
Look, you're not in California, right? Okay,
Not quite. I guess I could complain.
Right. Well, so you're telling me that the weather's a little bit more different in Baltimore than it is in New York City?
No, not really. In fact, we were just up in New York a couple of weeks ago. My daughter was up there interning for Amazon, of all places. So we were visiting her while she was working on her summer internship. And the weather is the same, pretty much. You know, maybe it might be raining up there and not down here, but other than that, you know, temperature-wise, it's the same.
Yeah, that's like 1 or 2 degrees, kind of like different. If that okay. You're married. You've got about 2 kids who must be in their 20s by now.
Yeah. Like I said, my daughter, she's working on graduating, so she's got that internship with Amazon. My son's working for the DoD, also graduating soon. So I'm almost an empty nester. It's getting close.
Okay, all right, okay. According to your LinkedIn profile, you're a SharePoint subject matter expert. What exactly does that mean? I have to say.
That's what I said. When they gave me that title, I was like, what exactly does that mean? That means anything that they want it to mean. So if hey, Dave, we need the floor sweep today, but that was duties as assigned. So I got to go. No, but yeah, I've worn a lot of hats. I've been doing work at the DoD for the last 10 years and started as what they called a customer service rep, which was like a glorified project manager working with one of the organizations that the U.S. Army has, an organization called CERDEC, which is our Army loves their acronym. So it's Communications, Electronics, Research, Development, Engineering Command. I think I got that right. For them, I was, if they needed SharePoint, I worked on their SharePoint, made sure it was running, made sure it was up. If they needed customizations, I put on a different hat, became a SharePoint developer. If they needed tweaking, I put on a different hat, became a SharePoint admin. If they had users that were being onboarded, I put on another hat, became a SharePoint trainer. So after wearing all those hats, they said, let's just call you a SME. And that way we cover everything.
Okay. So you mentioned something interesting, like for the DoD, you said you're a customer service manager, correct? Is that correct?
That's about right, yeah.
Okay, so I've seen this in organizations, you have like business engagement manager. Now with the DoD, you sort of have these visions that are somewhat institutionalized, and the technology and like the business or the organization is sort of like, it's perhaps not as functional as it well. So that seems like I won't say a radical, but it seems like quite an innovative sort of like idea for the DoD to have a role like that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So the organization that I support is called Miltech Solutions, and they're a government organization, but it's full of contractors like myself, and they don't have any funding. So in order for us to do any kind of work, we have to go to other government organizations like CERDEC and say, can we work for you? Will you pay us? So it's like an IT consultant, but for the government. So it makes us innovative. We're on our toes. It's not your typical, we work for the government, just put our feet up. It keeps us very lean and mean and on our toes.
Okay. So do you have government clearance or security clearance then?
Yeah, everyone, that works for the DoD has to have some level of clearance. It's an interesting process. You have to, they basically get all your information and then they go away into a dark room. And sometimes months later, you find out you either got it or you didn't. But yeah, and it's one of those things that, you can't get it unless you need it, and you don't need it, so like I got the job pending getting the clearance because I needed it for the job, but you can't go get the clearance without having a job to need it.
So how did you get your clearance? Like you must have had a sponsor basically.
Exactly. So the government organization, they basically say, hey, we're looking for someone for this position. typically they want you to already have the clearance. So they're literally looking for someone who's already working for the government somewhere else. But I got lucky 10 years ago where they were, I want to say desperate enough, where they were looking for people and they were like, okay, you don't have clearance yet, but we're going to sponsor you. We're going to put you through that process, and hopefully you'll pass it and you'll come on board. And they do that. They don't like to do that. If you already have clearance, that's a bonus, but they will occasionally sponsor people.
Okay, and how long did it take for you to get your clearance?
So I was an unusual one. Mine took about 30 days, and they told me I was the fastest ever. And they also told me it was because I was very, very boring. I didn't have much going on social media. Hadn't been out of the country. I hadn't moved around a lot. And both my brother and my father, my other brother, all had clearance before me. So it was one of those things where like, yeah, you checked all the boxes, you got it. Other people, I've heard it's taken as long as 6 months.
All right, okay. Tell me something about yourself that not many people know about you. Now, you said something called Tech Grizzer. What the earth is this?
Tech Girls. So it's girls with a Z. And that one's a cool thing. It's not something I meant to do. It was something I sort of fell into about 5 years ago, 2016. We were looking, my company said, we'd like to do some community outreach. I had already been doing some user groups. So I'd already had a user group called Mad SharePoint that helped, just like yours. But they wanted something a little different. So we looked around to see what else people were doing. We saw Microsoft was doing something called DigiGirls, where they would help young women get interested in STEM and be inspired. And because there's a gender gap, and they wanted to tell these young women that, hey, this is something that you get into. So we wanted to do something similar, but we didn't, they had already were doing DigiGirls. Well, lo and behold, a nonprofit out of Philadelphia that was working with Drexel University had something called Tech Girls, and they were looking for people to deliver these workshops locally and expand on it. And so that's what we did. We were the first Tech Girls workshops in Maryland. And we started going around to all the Boys and Girls Clubs and just delivering these workshops. And we still do, even with the pandemic, we can't do it in person anymore. But hey, we've got Microsoft Teams. So we showed the girls how to use Microsoft Teams. And then we moved online, and we've been delivering the workshops via Microsoft Teams now for the last, year and a half.
Very, very cool. Okay. What's a typical work day look like for you then?
So, a lot of it is meetings, right? What's going on.
Oh, welcome to that. Yes.
Make sure everything's working, make sure everything's up, networks and all that. And then we're looking at how can we make things better? We got a couple of I've got 5 site collections that I'm responsible for, and primarily, and then there's other ones that are sort of a secondary responsibility. But, we'll go on there and we're constantly seeing how we can make them better. I spent a lot of time on improving search, just making sure things are more findable, and as well as making things easier to be placed up onto the website. So it's like, usually say, hey, I can't find something. I'm like, why weren't you able to find that? Was it lower in the search results? Is that something I need to tweak? Or is there a web page I need to edit and, maybe do a little customization, a little HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to move things around and make it more, presentable? Yeah,
we've sort of done quite a bit of work with search, where it's almost a bit like people are searching on stuff, but it's almost been like, what are they searching on? And if they're doing searches, but they're not clicking on the results, then chances are there's something wrong with the search quality. Okay, so that's something which we've actually done with a number of law firms as well. That's in terms of searching knowledge, hence the agent of knowledge management, the agent of knowledge manager. So then, your first job out of college, then let's do a quick 5 minutes about yourself. What was your first job out of college?
Bartender. So that was one of my best jobs. And if I could afford to go back to doing it, I would, because that was just a blast. I worked at a little Italian restaurant down in Baltimore. Baltimore has a famous Little Italy. And I was at the Cornerstone restaurant called Valeggia's. And I was 18, so I wasn't even old enough to drink myself, but they put me behind the bar, and I was learning how to make drinks from all the older Italian gentlemen that were showing me all the fancy Italian drinks. And I just, my eyes were open wide as, wow, this is really, it felt very sophisticated. I loved it. They're no longer there, otherwise I'd run back and do it.
Okay. I'm not sure where that would fly today. You need to be an ID of 21, wouldn't you?
Yeah, they probably, back then it was kind of we'll let them go.
Okay, so I suspect your first version of SharePoint was something like Tejo, was it 2000-ish?
Yep, when I was working for a Microsoft Gold partner at the time, and we were doing, the traditional. What's funny, we were doing Microsoft stuff, a lot of Exchange, whatever, custom forms in Exchange, and we were doing a lot of Lotus Notes work. So we had that. That was actually most of our work. But then SharePoint came out, and we were like, wow, let's start selling our Lotus Notes customers this cheaper version because IBM was charging so much money for their licensing. Now all of a sudden we can sell them, Microsoft solutions.
Yeah, so I was working for a Lotus Notes partner. Yeah, Exchange was supposed to be the Notes killer, and it really wasn't. And then so like SharePoint really came out, and it kind of like, or what is now became SharePoint, which is that document management and the collaboration. So did you have W8 WSPs in 2000? Or no, not by any means.
No, they came along later. In fact, for a while, for two, we did a couple of installs in 2001. And basically, we were just, basically hooking up search to people's file shares and saying, look, now you can search your file share. Yep. 2003 was particularly a heinous edition of SharePoint, where we just really, it was, we kind of stepped back and said, maybe we don't want to do SharePoint. And then when 2007 came, we went back into it and said, all right, now we really like SharePoint. It's using tools that we're familiar with, SQL Server on the back end, true ASP.NET web parts. And it wasn't really until 2007 that we kind of really sank our teeth into it.
Right. What was your last challenging project you did the last month?
Oh, gosh. I'm doing a lot of JavaScript debugging nowadays where we've got some heavy customizations where, we're making crazy REST calls. We've got some encryption involved. And a lot of it is just figuring out why all of a sudden it worked one day and the next day it fell over. Half the time it's because we have these things at the Army called STIGs. Security, I forget what the TIG stands for, but basically, the Army will make sure that we're being compliant from a security standpoint, and we've got to turn certain services off, or we've got to block certain ports, or do things like that. So something that worked one day may all of a sudden stop working because they put in a security patch, and now you've got to figure out, oh, I can't use that technique anymore. I got to use a different technique. And it definitely keeps me on my toes because, like I said, something will be working for weeks and all of a sudden just stop and nothing changed. I didn't think anything changed, but the environment changed.
Are you developing SPFX web parts?
A little bit. So what we're doing at the Army and the DoD in general is what I like to call #cloud cautious. So we've been tipping our toe in the Microsoft cloud for the last 8 years, where we were actually mandated by a couple of presidents ago to go to the cloud. And every year we would say, well, we're not quite ready from a security standpoint. Let's file a waiver. But now we're starting. The pandemic kind of kickstart that process. We were actually one of the largest Teams tenants with our tenant called the CVR. We had millions of users just rush onto Teams out of necessity because of the pandemic. So now we've really gotten into, okay, we've got a Office 365 DoD tenant. Let's start making use of it. Let's figure out how we're going to start deploying and migrating from some of our on-premises solutions to the cloud. And so that's what we're looking at now, is how do we start taking some of these old on-premises solutions and refactor them and recreate them in SPFX or something else. So we're going through that process.
So are you sort of doing it in Angular or React? Is that
So we haven't really decided. We've looked at both of those, and we looked at others too. We've got a lot of open source developers that were looking to kind of help us with some of that. And so if they're familiar with some other library, we're like, hey, we'll keep an open mind about that. But yeah, we haven't really picked one that can kind of said this is the way. And in absence of any other directive, go with this one. I'd be interested, Peter. What are your thoughts on that? What is the one that you think everyone?
We sort of like, we have a couple of MVPs on staff, including myself. Okay, so basically it depends what the client's asking. So when like Tom Daly, one of the MVPs, he will recommend React. Okay, we've got a big client and they're doing a lot of stuff on Angular. Okay, and so therefore I have a feeling as a consulting firm, you do what the client asks. You advise them, you give them sort of some thought leadership, but sometimes that decision's already been made before you come to the party. So they decided on Angular and we went with Angular. However, with newer clients, we actually depend on React. So this doesn't exactly help teamwork in basically when one project ends, how do I get these Angular developers and how do I get them billable on another Angular project? Okay, because ideally you want to have everyone with the same skill set so you can move around the projects.
It's a problem I faced. I've been doing this for 30 years and I feel like, I can never pigeonhole myself, especially after Silverlight. Never again will I try to just learn one, right? Hey, I'm a Silverlight expert and then whoop, where'd that go? Yes.
Well, you must have seen the writing on the wall when Apple banned Adobe Flash and you realize with Silverlight's just a matter of time on that. And then when also HTML5 was coming along and you could do a lot of that.
Yep.
As well. What's the biggest mistake you think that holds back clients and their results that you get from SharePoint and Teams?
The biggest mistake that the clients make or that's holding them back from using Teams, They're still in email a ton. It's kind of a people problem, not really a technical problem. You try to introduce them to what Teams is and how it can help and how it can benefit, and they sort of pigeonhole it and say, okay, that's a chat client, or I only use that for meetings. And you're like, no, you can collaborate. You can do multi-author editing. You can, when you use it, it actually has SharePoint. One of the biggest things that my clients don't realize is that SharePoint lives behind Teams. They think it's, hey, do I either use Teams or do I either use SharePoint? I'm like, no, Teams is actually a nice front end to SharePoint, where you can put your documents up and use the team client to multi-author edit, but someone else could be have got to that document from SharePoint. Shoot, they could have got to it from OneDrive. They tend to think, well, no, this is the Teams thing, and this is a OneDrive, and this is SharePoint. They say, no, it's called integration for a reason, and it's tough to get them to understand that.
User experience, that's the key thing. That's the user experience. What's the biggest train wreck? Describe a good train wreck project you worked on.
Oh my gosh, let's see.
The list is too big, is it?
It's a long list. I mean, I think that the toughest ones are those ones where you see the writing on the wall and you're told to march forward anyway, right? We used to call those death marches, where I know this is going way back, but I used to work for an insurance company, and we were being bought by yet a larger insurance company. And they had probably 600 or 800 applications, and we knew that when we got bought, the majority of those applications were going to go by the wayside. And so, the project we were working on, we're like, why are we, the motivation was shot because you come in and you just knew that they were going to throw it in the trash, for lack of a better term. And so that was tough. But what I told my team at the time is I said, listen, even if they don't use this is our time to learn new technology. You don't have to be afraid of that. This is going to be, typically you worry about technical debt, where you do something, you go, man, I'm going to pay for this later, right? I was like, hey, if we know they're throwing this project out, you can try something weird, and don't worry, they're going to call you next year because it'll be gone. So yeah, we turned that train wreck into a fun ride. We said, look, let's throw this in here and throw that in here, and let's try, you talk about using, do we choose between React or some other library? I said, use them both. Use, whatever you want. If you want to use this and you want to use that, because they're going to get rid of this, Unfortunately, they did keep one of them.
That's good positive spin on something where, like, yeah, whatever you're doing, try and learn from it.
Exactly.
What's your favorite feature of M365?
Oh gosh, I love the OneDrive. OneDrive syncing to the hard drive has made so many people happy with. They did. I've got SharePoint. I hate to say haters, but there's some people that are very resistant to SharePoint, and a lot of folks that I work with are like me. They got they have a lot of years in it, and they're resistant to too much change. So I say, listen, here's how you can use your C drive, and in the background it's going to sync up to SharePoint for you. You don't have to go to SharePoint and upload anything like that. So I love me some OneDrive sync.
I totally agree, and the sync works well.
Right.
In the past, it has not been particularly that reliable. Where do you think SharePoint's going in the next 5 years?
That's a good question. I do feel right. I feel a little like it hasn't quite got the shine that it used to. I mean, we used to have all these conferences that were SharePoint this and SharePoint that, and now it's it's kind of been pushed in the corner, and we've got M365 and all that. And I know Microsoft desperately wants SharePoint to be online only, and yet I've still got a lot of on-premises people I have to worry about. So I don't know. I mean, I'm hoping that it sticks around. I'm always worried that they're going to say this is the 2019 is the last on-premises. So I'm hopeful that I'm a big believer that you can't, you shouldn't have one solution for something. It's nice to be able to have options. So I'm hoping that SharePoint continues on-premises, continues online, and then it just becomes easier to make the two work together.
Yep, I'll go along with that. Okay, so it's demo time. So what are you going to show? What's your time to shine? What are you going to show?
So I've got this one tool that I love to show off. Let me see. Not a lot of people are used to it. So let me bring this over here and let me share my screen. And this is part of a larger talk that I usually do, but I'm just going to whip through some of the slides to talk about what the demo is. So you see my screen okay?
I do indeed.
All right. So this is me talking about what we don't know about Teams, what we should. I usually go over, a little agenda and some objectives and all that. Talk a little bit about what Teams is. I announced, that the Department of Defense is, millions and millions of users, so we've got a lot of experience. And then we mentioned before the tech girls and how we use Teams a lot to keep that going. But this is the tool that I want people to kind of run away with. Teamsdemo.office.com. And whenever I show this, I'm surprised at how many people haven't seen this. So what this is, it's Microsoft's website to demo Teams And there's a couple reasons I love it. Number one, it's browser-based. It's a click-through demo, so you can demo Teams without having to take over Teams, right? I mean, we're in Teams now, and I'm showing you Teams. It's got 2 different kind of experiences, desktop or mobile. It takes about 5 minutes, and you can either give this to a client. I've actually emailed this to folks and said, hey, just walk through. This will give you some of the cool features in Teams that you might not know about. One of the problems, you kind of alluded to this earlier, is what are challenges of getting folks to use Teams is that it seems so easy. Microsoft does such a great job marketing Teams that people don't think you need training, but I don't think anything could be further from the truth. You absolutely should be trained on Teams, showing what the features are and how to use them. Otherwise, how are you supposed to use it effectively? So this tool does that. It walks you through and it shows you, the little icons on the left-hand side and how you can, what the little notifications mean, and it walks you through, joining a team and creating a new team. That's something a lot of my users never like, wow, I can create my own team. I'm like, yes, you can create your team. Here, let me show you some screenshots of how to do it. You can walk through it. So it walks them through choosing between from scratch or using an existing group, which is an interesting tidbit if I back up for just a second. One of the things that we ran into at the DoD is if we created a team from scratch, it didn't show up in Outlook under groups. So now sort of our standard operating procedure is we create the group first, then we create the team from the group. That way it's automatically showing up in Outlook under groups so people can email the group very easily from Outlook. So that's not something that this tool highlights, but it is one of those things that one of those gotchas that we came across. And so now we do it. There is a PowerShell command. So if you build a team from scratch, and then you want it to show up in Outlook groups, there's a PowerShell command you can run to make it show up. But by default, at least at the current Teams release, it doesn't show up. So our standard operating procedure is create the team as an Office 365 group first, then come in and then create the team from the group. So again, this tool is really cool because as you walk through here, it just, again, walks you through, stepping through, choosing. This one's copying an existing one, walk through again, naming it. And I've just got so many project managers, people that need to know how to do this, but they're not very technical. This is a great tool for showing them, step by step how to get it done, what the results would look like.
Are you clicking through this, or is this a script kind of thing?
I'm clicking through it, so it doesn't, unless I click next, it won't move.
Okay.
So yeah, and it walks you through what the difference between a private team and a public team. It walks you through the purpose of the 3 dots, the ellipsis, managing team. That's another one that, people, once they create a team, they don't realize you can go in, you can make changes to it. You can try different settings. So this tool introduces them to going through and adding additional members, removing, adding guests, removing guests. So things that people, tech folk like us, we'll go in there, we'll dig around, we'll figure all this out. But a project manager doesn't really have time for that. But this is, again, a quick 5 minutes. They walk through. This one's a real cool demo where it walks them through the purpose of conversations. One of the biggest problems I have is that people will be in a channel and they'll post something, and someone will post a new conversation as a response. And then there's a third, and then the conversations get all mixed up. So I have them walk through this and explains to them, listen, when you're having a conversation, use the reply. Use that reply down here, and that way it keeps it threaded and keeps it nice and neat. Otherwise, you're going to have a jumble of mess. And so, again, this one does a real good job of walking them through what they're doing. Shows them how to @mention people. That's something the younger folks know how to do this, right? Yeah. If I have my kids know, but the folks like myself, especially the project managers and whatnot, they're like, @mention. What are you talking about? What is that about? Another benefit of this tool is that it'll actually show you features that you may not be aware of, like the translation feature. So here we've got someone speaking Spanish, and if you didn't know, Teams has this little translate that will, in this case, translate it to English. That was something I didn't know about. I was given this demo one day, and all of a sudden it popped up, and I was like, hey, I found. So the demo was updated, because the first time I did this demo, I guess that particular feature wasn't in Teams, but they updated this demo, and then it showed that, this is a new feature. So it walks through files and uploading files, getting notifications for chat, the one-on-one group or the one-on-one chats, and how to add people to that, and the difference between that and an actual conversation and a channel on Teams. So again, a really, really powerful tool that walks them through some of these, formatting and things like that. through some of the really the basics of Teams that they might not know if they just were thrown in with both feet, which is what happens to a lot of people. The pop-out chat. So yeah, it's a wonderful tool, you know.
No, it is. I like it.
Yeah, so teamsdemo.office.com. That's really sort of one of the biggest things that we like to lead with.
I like that. Okay, is this is your demo? Anything else, or is that this is the sizzle?
I'll give you one more real quick one, and this is sort of a pet peeve of mine. When I have a lot of these meetings, one of the issues that we run into a lot is, for instance, I've got, you know, my user group managed SharePoint, and I'll do a meeting. So here's me in my little demo meeting, and I'll start my meeting, and I've got my meeting, and I've sent an invitation to someone to join the meeting. So when they go to join the meeting, they come up and they get the email, but for whatever reason, maybe they switched browsers or they're just not logged in. When they join the meeting, they're not joined as themselves, or not the person who I invited, right? So they'll come in to the lobby. That's my first indication that something's wrong, right? And people, I don't know about you, but when I'm late for a meeting or the meeting's just about to start, I don't care if I'm in the lobby. I'm like, just let me in. But now when I admit them to the lobby, they're not the person I invited, right? They are. It may say the same name, but they're going to have different things. You know, they're going to have something like this: temporary join the chat, and then when they leave, they're no longer going to have access to the chat. That's not what I wanted. I didn't want them to go to the lobby. So the big takeaway here is when you invite someone to a meeting, you know, try to make sure that when they sign in, they're using the actual identity that was invited and the tenant that they were invited to. So it's two different things that people get confused. So here's my, for example, here I am. This identity that I'm logged in over here is my managed SharePoint. You know, you can tell. David,
how do you do that though? Because like you send me an invite, you've given me instructions. Why do you think I'm going to read the instructions? No one reads instructions anymore.
Exactly. No, this is my struggle. We haven't solved this particular problem. How do I would love it if there was a URL. I've actually tried to craft a URL that forced the ID and the tenant, but I wasn't able to do that. Yeah, I haven't solved this particular nut. I don't know. Education. So right now we just go out to a lot of people. We try to explain what, you know, the identity is. We try to explain the difference between the two tenants. You're right. They won't read. I actually have to have meetings. We do like lunch and learns where I'll show people this and I'll say, listen, and then I'll say, tell your friends that, you know, if they're joining the meeting and if they're running into these kind of issues, because they'll blame Teams. They'll say, well, Teams wasn't working. Teams wasn't doing this. I'm like, no. It wasn't that Teams wasn't working. It's that you did it wrong. You came into this tenant, but you were supposed to be in this tenant, you know, and they don't like to hear that, but that is the reality of it. So until we can figure out a way to force the correct username and tenant, right now it's just a lot of user education. Sure.
Okay. It's not you're right. It's a bit of a pet peeve on that. I agree that the other thing as well, when they're running late, they hit this and says, "Oh, do you need to download the Teams tenant?" And it's like, "Oh no, I just want to get in the meeting," you know, kind of thing. Okay. Or it says, "Oh yeah," and the security is saying, "Oh, blocked, no downloads."
Right. Exactly.
What's your biggest nightmare project you've worked on?
Probably some of those projects for the insurance company I used to work for. They were a lot of, you know, just get it done. You had deadlines that couldn't be moved. I felt like they didn't really care about what we were actually doing. It was more about, you know, meeting the deadline, which was a terrible way to do project management.
What's your best and worst tech advice you've been given?
The best advice is, you know, step up and walk away. Stop beating your head against the wall. Don't spend more than X amount of time. Usually it's like 30 minutes or an hour. I don't know how many times I've worked on something for 3 hours at night and then fix it in 5 minutes the next day.
Yes. I've had that for myself.
Right. And the worst is probably that, you know, pick any language. That's the best. You got to use that all the time. I mean, people tell me all the time, you got to use C#. You have to use, you know, Oracle. You have to use SQL. You have to use. It's like this blind loyalty to a particular technology or language or anything. That's never served me well. I'm definitely. People have accused me of being a you know, jack of all trades, master of none. But I feel like if I've got the fundamentals and I'm able to move through different, you know, solve different problems using different sets of tools, I've been very successful with that.
Well, but what's your response to the fact that if you end up being a jack of all trades rather than a specialist? Like, because if you look at like a specialist, like a heart surgeon is a specialist. Okay, it's a limited market, but it's a market people will pay a heart surgeon a lot more than a generalist. So What's your response to my comment on that then?
Right. So I try to do a little of both. Obviously, I'm a big Microsoft guy, so I've specialized in Microsoft technologies. I've bet on a pretty safe company to specialize in. But within that, you end up having to specialize somewhat, right? I do a lot of SQL. I do a lot of .NET. I do a lot of SharePoint. But, when Silverlight came in, I spent a lot of time on that now doesn't have any value. So that burned me pretty good, to be honest. So I'm very, whenever a new technology, SPFX, comes along, I'm like, okay, let me, let's vet it. Let's see who else is using it. Let's, look around. So before I spend a lot of time on one thing, I will kind of look, tentatively look around and see who else is, what other people had to say about it. So it's, can't be a jack, like I do a little bit with Amazon Web Services, but I can't spend too much time over there. That's, I kind of just aware of what's going on over there and what's going, it's just too much. You can't be that kind of jack of all trades.
Right. Okay. No, I understand. What are you working on to become a better developer, consultant, CTO?
So I do two things. One is certifications. I'm a certification junkie. Every time a new certification comes out, I'm looking at it. So I just took a bunch of the fundamentals, the AZ 900 and the Office 365 fundamentals and all those. And I think Microsoft Learn is a great resource to go out there to the Microsoft Learn website, and they've got, read through these videos and do these hands-on exercises. They even give you free Azure credits and sandboxes. So you get a little bit of credit, but the sandbox will actually create you don't even have to have any credits. It'll create a tenant in your Azure where you can do like 4 hours, you can work on a lab, and then it just all gets thrown away. So Microsoft Learn, fabulous resource geared towards some of these, especially the fundamental exams. I use them exclusively to pass like 8 different fundamental exams in the last month or two. And the other thing I do is I like to interact with young folk, the students. I teach at a couple of the community colleges, and they do young folks do a fantastic job by asking me questions of, hey, what is this and what's that? And they get me thinking outside the box. Okay.
Are you using any third-party certificate exam online courses?
No, I generally... Not that there's anything wrong with them, but Microsoft Learn has just so much to offer for free. Okay. It's hard for me. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love Pluralsight. Pluralsight's a great one. I mean, it costs money though.
Sure. Okay. Where do you think you're going to be in the next 5 years?
Probably right where I'm at now. I really like what I'm doing. I like working with my current customer. I like working with my current group. I like, part-time teaching at the university. Yeah, I don't really have any plans for change. I want to do more. So, I'll probably do I can't wait till we get back to in-person meetings again and my user group get that. I was supposed to do New England SharePoint Saturday or New England.
I know, I got accepted for that. It got cancelled. Yeah.
And got canceled. So I'm really, looking forward to getting back to the way things were. I'm hopeful.
The Carpo San Lucas is on actually.
Yeah, I saw that.
Did you also see about the SPFX events website is going to be discontinued?
Yeah, and it had a good long run. I know Susan did a fantastic job along with everyone else, and I'm a little disappointed, a little sad. But there are others. There's Sessionize.
Yeah, well, I think it's all like Sessionize wasn't around 10 years ago, or or what it is now. I think it served its life, you could say.
Exactly.
What's your blind spot with the Microsoft knowledge?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. There's so many. And one of the things is my students help me with that, because I will literally have a student ask me a question about something and I'll go, let me go look that up. And it'll be a completely, and I like to think of myself as a Microsoft guy. When they whip out a technology that Microsoft introduced and has out there and I don't know about, one of the ones I learned about 4 or 5 years ago, but was Microsoft Kodoo, which is a gaming environment that is geared towards helping young folks learn how to program through a user interface, through a GUI. And I had never heard of Microsoft Kodoo. It had been around a long time when I finally heard about it. But there's tons of Microsoft, programs, features out there. I've come to accept I can't know them all.
All right. Okay. Where do you typically source all your knowledge from?
So, a lot of the Microsoft sites, Microsoft Learn, has been really fantastic. The old Channel 9, which has still got a lot of good videos out there. Follow a lot of other MVPs. Scott Hanselman is one of my big follows. He's just got a ton. Puts out that newsletter and puts out hanselminutes.com. So I'm also a Microsoft certified trainer. So a lot of my Microsoft trainer friends I follow and see what they're up to and what they're doing. Brian Altman. Yeah. Ted Malone. A lot of them have what we call smurfed, right? They've gone blue, where they actually work for Microsoft now. So
is that what the term? I've never heard that term.
you've never heard? Yeah, they've smurfed. They went because blue badge. So Ted Malone was one of them who was a longtime trainer, and now he works for Microsoft. But it's nice to stay in touch with those folks and kind of find what's going on, what's coming down the pipe. Should I really be learning Silverlight or maybe not?
The Netscape guy. Who's Mark Anderson?
No, from New England. He's one of the
yes. Yeah, Mark Hansen. Yes.
Yeah, that Mark Hansen. And plus, he's the author of SPS Query.
Correct. Yes.
He's a great guy. When I first met him back, I can't remember the first Boston SharePoint Saturday I did, but he just super approachable and down to earth. I love that kind of a real, not one of these guys that kind of walks around and it's like kiss my hand type of thing.
No, I understand that. Yeah.
And if you go out and look at any of the whenever anyone has a question about his library, he's usually the one answering it, which is surprising. He goes out there and he supports it, for no money.
Right. No, that's a good thing. Yeah, that's why he's an MVP. All right. So, if there was one song that could describe SharePoint, what would it be?
Well, the one I forget what
You said Blink 182 and Damn It.
Damn it, yes. Because that's what so my user group is called Mad SharePoint because sometimes we're mad about it, but other times we're mad at it, and it's nothing like when a workflow worked yesterday, but today just, and the error message is system error. And you're like, why SharePoint? Why? I love it. I have a love-hate relationship with SharePoint. It makes some things incredibly easy and other things incredibly difficult, but that's what keeps it fun.
Right. Okay. All right. Where can people find you?
Twitter at David E. Patrick. LinkedIn, same thing. Sessionize, same thing. I try to, David E. Patrick. So it's funny. So I'm an MVP, but there's actually another MVP named Dave Patrick. And every now and then I get confused with him. He's like a file system, Windows, cloud guy. I'm more of an Office 365 SharePoint guy. But so I'm David E. Patrick.
Yes, there's a SharePoint MVP who does SQL in Australia called Peter Ward. Yes. I'm doing that. And David, it's been an absolute pleasure, and we'll get this recording up across the podcasts and our social networks. Good seeing you, and I look forward to. Unfortunately, I'm not going to see you in November for SharePoint New England, but I'm sure that day will come.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
No problem. Okay, thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.